1945. The war is over. Hooray! The bad guys lost, and the good guys are so broke they're considering eating their own furniture. Usually, when you win a war, you take everyone's stuff and go home. But America realized something terrifying. If everyone else stays poor, there's nobody to buy their stuff. And if there's nobody to buy their stuff, the Great Depression comes back, meaning the American economy would be fucked. So the Americans did the most main character move in history. They invited everyone to a hotel in New Hampshire, probably served them mediocre coffee, and told them, "From now on, the ocean is mine. But you can use it. I'll protect your boats. I'll even let you sell your junk in my stores. Just don't become communists. Please, I'm begging you." This was the Pax Americana, or, as I like to call it, the era of universal free shipping. Before this, if you were a tiny country like Belgium and you wanted coffee from Brazil, you had to hope a bigger country didn't sink your boat just for the vibes. But under the Americans, suddenly everyone could trade. It was a golden age of toasters, cheap plastic, and made in Taiwan stickers. For 70 years, we lived in a world where geography didn't matter. You could build a car with parts from 14 countries and not worry about a pirate with a rocket launcher ruining your quarterly earnings. It was great. It was peaceful. It was incredibly expensive for the American taxpayer. And then finally, in 2001.
My fellow citizens, at this hour, American and coalition forces are in the early stages of military operations to disarm Iraq, to free its people, and to defend the world from grave danger. On my orders, coalition forces have begun striking selected targets of military importance to undermine Saddam Hussein's ability to wage war.
Since the 2000s, America spent 20 years trying to fix the Middle East. It didn't work. They looked at their bridges falling down. They looked at their politics, which is currently a dumpster fire in a hurricane. And then they looked at their oil. See, America found a way to squeeze oil out of rocks. Fracking. Suddenly, they didn't need the Middle East. They didn't need the global supply chain as much as everyone else. They started looking at the global security guard job and realizing the pay sucked, and the customers were all complaining about the service. After spending over $8 trillion fighting in the desert for 20 years and essentially getting their ass kicked by guys in flip-flops, America reached a breaking point. The American public looked at their healthcare bills, their crumbling highways, and then at the massive bill for the global security guard job. That's when a certain orange man stepped onto the stage in 2016 and said the quiet part out loud. This is a terrible deal. He wasn't just being loud, he was hitting a nerve. The US was essentially paying for the world's bodyguards, while the world was busy outcompeting them in business. Also, previously, America guarded the oceans and the Middle East to secure sweet, sweet oil. But as I said, it had just discovered fracking. Texas and Pennsylvania were producing enough oil to keep the American market satisfied. The Americans didn't need the Middle East anymore. By 2019, for the first time since 1949, America was a net exporter of energy. It was officially done being the sugar daddy of the world. To still keep the peace in the Middle East, the Abraham Accords was brokered between Israel, Bahrain, and the UAE in 2020. Then in 2021, the controversial pullout from Afghanistan. America pulled out messier than your father did from your mother. It was expensive, slow, and the military left a bunch of military equipment which the Taliban now uses to have some fun. See, the 70-year peace wasn't a law of nature. It was an artificial, high-maintenance environment, like a pressurized space station. And America? He was the guy paying the oxygen bill and fixing the life support. But recently, he looked at the international security surcharge and decided he'd rather spend that money on literally anything else. Now, the vacuum of deep space is sucking the air out of the room, and everyone is realizing they forgot how to breathe on their own. First to go? The borders. In 2022, Putin noticed that the red lines were being drawn in disappearing ink and tried to alt-delete Ukraine. It wasn't just a local war. It was a vibe check to see if America had actually left the room. Spoiler alert, yes. But don't mistake leaving the room for being nice. In 2026, America hasn't gone soft. It's gone mercenary. If the old Pax Americana was a community center, the new version is a high-end protection racket. Look at Operation Absolute Resolve. On January 3rd, the US decided they were tired of Maduro and his Russian-made rockets. They didn't send a sternly worded letter from the UN. They sent 150 aircraft and a secret sonic weapon called the Discombobulator that made every guard in Caracas vomit blood while Delta Force just walked in. Trump told the press at Davos, Venezuela said let's do a deal after the attack. They'll make more money in 6 months than they did in 6 years. Translation? America is running the gas station now. They aren't spreading democracy. They're recouping their bill. And then there's Greenland. For decades, it was a nice, quiet Danish territory where people looked at igloos. In 2026, it's a strategic necessity. Trump told Denmark, sell it, or I'll 25% tariff your entire economy into the dark ages. Denmark tried to call their friends in the EU, but the EU realized that without American protection, their entire defense strategy is basically just hoping the bad guys are tired. Trump even sent a text to Norway's prime minister saying he no longer felt an obligation to think purely of peace after they gave the Nobel Prize to a Venezuelan opposition leader instead of him. It's 19th century imperialism with 21st century weaponry. If you have land America wants, your sovereignty is just a suggestion. While America is busy with Greenland and Venezuela, Russia is realizing they messed up big time. It's January 2026, and Russia has lost over 1.1 million men in Ukraine. That's not a military stat, that's a demographic suicide note. Putin tried to replace the West with China, but he's realizing that China doesn't want a partner. They want a gas station they can exploit. Russia is currently a frozen wasteland of old men and broken tanks, desperately trying to relaunch trilateral cooperation with India and China because they realized they can't actually build a toaster without Western chips. And then, about China, the factory of the world, and the greatest benefactor of Pax Americana. The rise of China seems to challenge the 80-year-old American hegemony, making Orange Man nervous. In 2026, Trump announced insane tariffs on China for bad behavior. But that's not even the biggest threat. China's population is shrinking faster than any nation in human history. They are the first country to grow old before they manage to get truly rich. And you can't run a global manufacturing empire with a workforce that's heading into retirement homes. Worse yet, China is an island in terms of resources. They have to import almost all of their energy and raw materials through narrow ocean choke points that the US Navy still controls. Not to mention the route oil tankers take to reach China goes straight through the Indian Ocean. And India isn't China's biggest fan either. India has been pumping up its navy and arming its islands, ready to mess with China in case of any border problems. With each major power in decline or at each other's throat, there is no clear successor to the American-based world order. So who's next? Who steps up to be the new world police? The short answer? Nobody. China can't project power across oceans like America. Russia is a gas station currently on fire. The EU is a committee that can't decide what to have for lunch. Without the American sugar daddy subsidizing global security, geography and regional bullies are back to mess with your corporate supply lines. If you want trade, you'll have to build your own navy to protect it. Was the past 70 years of free trade a fluke caused by American hegemony? Or will we be able to cooperate to keep the world order stable? We can only wait and find out.